Hello and good evening. Thank you for zooming in for tonight's Yampa Valley State of the River, brought to you by the Colorado River District, Community Agriculture Alliance, and the Yampa White-Green Basin Roundtable. My name is Alicia Frederick. I'm the Director of Information Outreach at the Colorado River District, and I'll be your MC for this evening. On the screen with me is Ag Resource Coordinator for our partner, the Community Agriculture Alliance, Patrick Stanko, to say a few words.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I appreciate the Colorado River District for hosting this event. And I also want to say, if you need more information about your roundtable, the Yampa White-Green Basin Roundtable, which is also a sponsor of this event, please visit their website at yampawhitegreen.com for more information. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. And again, if you want that information, Eleanor in the background will put that into the chat so that you can view that website at any time on your own. Tonight, we've got a really great lineup of presenters to help us learn about current Yampa Basin water issues and ongoing drought challenges facing West Slope water users. Before we bring up our first speaker, Jim Procamp, the Director of Community Affairs for the Colorado River District, we'll give everyone some time to get settled in and show you a brief video about the Colorado River District and the work we do for you.
On Colorado's western slope, water is everything. From high atop the Rocky Mountains to the Grand Valley and beyond, these waters have shaped our history. They form the backbone of our rural economies, and they have sustained generations of hard-working families. Since 1937, the Colorado River District has been safeguarding western slope water for agriculture, for recreation, for industry, and for the environment.
We were formed 82 years ago to give voice and protection to the needs of the river and the people and the communities that depend on it.
We run a cow-calf operation for the ranch, and we supplement our income through running a fly fishing guided outfitter. The water is what matters to all of us and what we all need. The river is in a tug-of-war state between consumptive use and non-consumptive needs. For irrigation diversion projects associated with agriculture, we need cool, clean water. Trout fishermen downstream needs cool, clean water. The River District acts as a great intermediary between all of those needs. The river is what binds us all.
Whether you're a rancher in Moffat County or a boater in Summit County, you depend upon the Colorado River. And getting people to recognize their common interests and the leverage we have when we speak with one voice is what the Colorado River District does.
People just don't realize how valuable the River District is. By bringing us together, we all of a sudden understood this was our river, and what was good for one of us was good for both of us. It's an opportunity that the West Slope has to have a strong voice. And if the people of the West Slope don't recognize that, the Colorado River and all its tributaries that we love and what brought us here is going to go away too. We're either in it together or we're going down one at a time.
If you take the environmental needs for the river and you realize what's important for the environment, those same exact things are important for ag. They're important for industry, and they're very important for recreation.
10% of our gross domestic product is outdoor recreation. People that like to paddle on rivers also like to eat Palisade peaches and live here. The River District's doing a great job changing the framework to be one of collaboration.
On the West Slope, water is the lifeblood of this community. Our water and our ability to serve agricultural producers and industrial consumers, the municipalities, we all depend on having water in the river, and no one wants to see a dry river. Without water, you take that out of the picture, you have nothing.
Without the river district, the West Slope would be a very different place. We'd have less water in our rivers, we'd have less agriculture, less of an economic engine that is recreation.
I can't survive as an ag business if I don't have my water. The role of the River District is to work with entities around our basin in a cohesive way to accomplish the local goals as well as the Western Colorado goals as far as protecting our natural resource and making sure that water is used correctly.
The River District has managed over the years to fight the Front Range and the Trans Mountain diverters. We're able to bring a voice to the table and present that united front that is so important at keeping water in our rivers flowing westward.
The next generation is here. My grandsons are growing up here. We've got to make sure that they have the same chance that my daughter did, who's now here, and that I had from my dad. The whole West Slope, to me, is a natural resource-based economy, and water is number one in that natural resource. And how do we manage that so that the next generation has the same joy that we have?
For more than 80 years, one entity has been working to keep West Slope water on the Western Slope. These are your rivers. This is your water. And this is your Colorado River District.
Well, I think we lost our MC for a minute, so I'll just jump right in. We have an action-packed show tonight, and time will be of the essence. My name is Jim Pokrant, Community Affairs Director of the Colorado River District, and I have 15 minutes to tell you as much about the River District as I can. And we'll have a PowerPoint up here in a second. But suffice to say that the Colorado River District is everything that was in that film. And I really like the line, we're in it together, or they're going to pick us off one at a time. The River District is comprised of 15 counties in Western Colorado, including, and here we go, including Routt and Moffett and Rio Blanco. And these counties don't have any Trans Mountain diversions. So you might wonder, why are you banded together with these other counties that do have Trans Mountain diversions? Well, that's the point. The Yampa Basin is lucky that there aren't any trans basin diversions yet, and the Gunnison Basin doesn't have any either. The bullseye is in the Colorado. So there we go. So we were formed in 1937 for this very reason, that the Front Range, which is water short, is eyeballing the West Slope, which has the preponderance of water. And we read about it in the newspaper. West Slope leaders read about this fact in the newspapers, and it was a huge wake-up call. And this was about 1933. So what happened is a lot of leaders in the West Slope banded together and begged for money and went toe-to-toe with Front Range water interests. So this is just to say, again, that we were formed in 1937 to protect West Slope water users. And why do we have to do that? Because at least when you come to the Continental Divide is not a barrier to water development. The Colorado Constitution says that the right to appropriate water shall not be denied. And if you can permit a project and engineer it and have customers and finance it, you can go for it. And that's actually what's happened. But again, not in the Yampa White, but I'm reminded that let's just say, hey, we don't like reading about this stuff in the newspapers. And it's in fact why we do have lobbyists at the Colorado legislature to look for these shenanigans. And also we have a legal team eyeballing all the filings in water court to make sure nothing is sneaking through. So, this is our district, and of course everybody knows where Routt is, and then of course the Yampa Basin goes out into Moffett County, and the round table also covers the White River Basin and a little bit of the green that comes in here in this oxbow. So we were formed, and actually the legislature formed us, and we were able to have a mill levy rate, a property tax, to be the watchdogs on the river and make sure that none of these things snuck up on us again. Trying to get back to that last slide. Can, Eleanor, can you reverse? Yeah. So what do? So this is how our missions developed, other being watchdog. It's to keep water flowing to farms and ranches. And why is that important? Agriculture is the backbone of Western Colorado. And in fact, agriculture owns most of the senior water rights, which actually control in a lot of places in the state the direction of water. And but for agriculture, for everything we love about it, and the food and fiber and culture, if these water rights weren't in place and providing beneficial use, some of the water could be gone to the Front Range. Not so much in the Yampa White, because you don't have trans-mountain diversions and you don't want them. So also, as I was mentioning on our legal team, we secure legal protections to keep water on the West Slope. So yes, because of the Constitution says the right to appropriate water shall not be denied, we have to negotiate the best deal for the West Slope possible. And we just can't say no and have a legal basis to win that fight. We have to negotiate to protect our interests. We're all part and parcel to all this is ensuring that there's adequate drinking water supplies. So it's just not about agriculture, it's from municipal use too, even though that's actually a small portion of water use in all of Colorado, not just the West Slope. And of course, since the 1970s, the beginning of the environmental era, maintaining healthy rivers has become another big thing. And in fact, we'll hear later about integrated water management plans, and the River District, through its participation in the basin roundtables, is working hard on that issue too. So it's just not in Colorado where we're eyeballing all these things. We have to play in a bigger basin. And this is where we live. Everybody knows where Colorado is. The River District provides about 65% of the water to the whole basin, Lake Powell and Lake Mead. And when you add in the Southwestern District, it's about 75%. But look at these gray areas outside the natural watershed. This is water exported from our basin. And these are big factors, especially in Colorado. And because of these gray areas in Colorado is the reason that we exist. But the legislature created us also to look out for all of Colorado's interest in the Colorado Basin that's governed by the Colorado River Compact of 1922, which cut up the river, half for the upper basin and half to the lower basin. That's an oversimplification, but that's the way it works. So when we're talking about the lower basin, we're talking about heavy consumption of water. They use all of their allocation, and here's a cotton field that Andy Mueller found on a trip to the lower basin, a highly consumptive crop, and it speaks to the fact that the lower basin is overusing the river by 1.1 to 1.3 million acre feet a year. So it's just not because of cotton. They also do not count evaporation, and they do not count transit losses to their counting of the river. So they're overusing the river, and guess what? The upper basin is not overusing the river. We're only consuming about 4.5 million acre feet in the 4 upper basin states, and the lower basin is consuming about 10 and a half, 11 million acre feet. So they're working hard, partly at our behest, but partly because of the contingency planning era that we're living in to get into their allocation. So let's talk about what's behind all of this policy, and it's water in the arid West. So this is Colorado. Just if you don't have to read the numbers, and you probably can't, but look at the size of the blue, and you see the Yampa up in the left-hand corner. the Yampa on the average, long-term average, provides about 1.5 million acre feet to the out-of-state flow of the Colorado River system. You compare that to the Colorado main stem, the big one in the middle, 4.4 million acre feet. Of course, that includes the Gunnison. But you can see how much water flows out of Colorado, and we're just looking to the west side. You can see lesser amounts flowing out into the Arkansas and the South Platte and the Rio Grande as well. So just wanted to show you Yampa's role in the bigger picture. So now let's switch to a little discussion about where we are in the big picture. So precipitation is important. And if you see these browner colors, like in the northwest part of the state, bullseye there on Moffat County. But look at the sweet spot in Routt County along the mountains there. And that's why the Yampa is one of the reasons why the Yampa is such a big part of the Colorado River system, even though it's not as big as some other parts. But the Zirkle Range there is a big snow producer. But look how much of the state is producing snow, and look how much is arid. It's pretty insignificant when it comes to geography. This is another look at where snow comes from. And this is the whole Colorado River Basin. And you can see the importance of Colorado in this big picture. And in fact, areas that are above 9,500 feet are the real snow sheds in Colorado. And the fact of the matter is that areas that are 9,500 feet elevation and higher are a very small percentage, if you look in the right-hand column, of the landmass and of all the basin, and the areas below 8,000 feet are 3/4 of the size. So you see what snow shed is and the importance of Colorado. So this is how we create water supply, which is the heart and soul of everything that we work on. Snow accumulation is about 80% of the input. Monsoons, which we should be having now, and they started recently, are about 10%, and then groundwater input and base flows are about 10%. Let's talk about temperature. So snow is the big thing about moisture, and the biggest enemy of moisture is heat. And these are figures compiled by NOAA as illustrated by the Washington Post. And you can see where this hotspot, a big nation's hotspot, is centered in the American Southwest, and a big part in Western Colorado, where we are. And here's what's been happening to temperatures since 1895, and you can look up to Routt County. The temperatures are have risen by 2.8 degrees Fahrenheit, Moffat 3.9 degrees, Rio Blanco 4.3. You come down to Montrose 4.3, and Mesa, Grand Junction 4.2. But even if you look along the Continental Divide, you see significant temperature rises. These look like low numbers, but they're really not when you're considering average temperatures. So temperatures are the new threat. We've talked about trans-mountain diversions. We've talked about lower basin overuse. So temperatures, the warming climate, is really what the River District is seeing as the third leg, a third threat on the river. And it's our job to try and look ahead and develop policies that deal with these things. And of course, everybody knows about the trans-mountain diversions, Colorado River Compact, but temperature, this is the biggest threat right now. This is just a graph to show that if you see the blue, that was the old normal, and if you see those red dots, that's the new normal. And I can tell you as a skier, I've been wondering what's happened to March for the last 12 years or so. March is supposed to be the big month, but it's not turning out to be anymore, and that's part of this long-term shift to a new normal. So the problems from our water supply standpoint are we're getting more fall and spring precipitation falling as rain instead of snow, i.e. March. We're seeing more snowpack loss to sublimation. That's means it doesn't melt, it goes right up into the sky. And we're getting an earlier snow melt. Spring skiing is starting way too early as far as I'm concerned, and I'm sure a lot of people have experienced that anecdotally. And we have a longer growing season. So what happens when it's warmer out? That's great for plants, but they need more water. And that includes our lawns. So that's another factor brought about by temperature that we can't ignore. Some people may have read recently that the River District has its own challenges. So here we are, we're dealing with, trying to come up with policies dealing with the new normal, still eyeballing mountain diversions, and dealing with big river issues with Arizona, Las Vegas, and California. But meanwhile, here's a familiar story for Routt County and Moffat County, declining tax revenue from the energy industry, and that's not going to get any better. It's only going to get worse. Then we have revenue rationing down due to Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. That was passed in 1992. I remember it well. And what happens is that when you have a downturn in the economy and your tax revenues fall, that's your new baseline. You don't go back to what it was before and be able to collect that. Then there's this thing called the Gallagher Amendment, which tries to balance property taxes collected from commercial and residential interests at 55% and 45% each. And what's happened in Colorado is that residential growth has taken off, especially on the Front Range, and to keep that 55-45 ratio, the ability to tax residential property has shrunk. And that's another reason for flat and declining revenues. So what's the River District done? We've cut 4 full-time employees, thankfully, by attrition, and we've reduced expenses by 15% across the board. And fortunately right now, or unfortunately because of COVID, we're saving money because we're not traveling. And unfortunately, we're not up there in Steamboat right now talking to you about this kind of thing. So we're doing everything we can to stay relevant in these challenging times. So the board of directors has been talking about this for 2 years. We have 15 board of directors members from our 15-member counties. Doug Munger is your Routt County member. Tom Gray is a Moffat County member, and Al Vandenbrink is the Rio Blanco County member. So on July 21st, the board of directors finally took action that it's worth the risk to go to voters in this uncertain year to ask for an increase in our property tax up to 0.5 mils. So our current property rate is about 0.25 mils. So this would almost double it. And fortunately, these are low numbers because if you look at, we have other information that across the state, the average increase for a medium residential house would be $6.34. Routt County, because you have a lot of second homes, the average increase would be $8.60. Rio Blanco County, the average increase would be $2.94, and in Moffat County it would be $2.72. And this is a year. So, you know, even around $8.60 to help us keep an eye on your water issues would be what we're asking. And how are we going to use the money, that extra money that we're going to collect? The board of directors actions envisions collecting $4.9 million, and we're going to use $4.2 million of that to put into projects in the 15 counties. So the part of the board action include a financial implementation plan. And what we did, we took projects created by the roundtables. So there's a list of projects for each roundtable, and in the Yampa White Green roundtable, some of the projects that would exemplify how we would spend the money would be improving the Maybell Ditch, working on the Yampa River forest restoration and temperature mitigation in streams, White River algae study and potential mitigation. And yes, it would be helping folks in Rio Blanco County understand the value and the potential of the White River storage project. So My time is almost up, and this information is available on our website, and the fiscal implementation plan will provide the details of how this might be spent, because that's always the first thing people ask, what are you going to do with the money? And finally, I will say we're not going to hire any new employees. And you can post your questions on the Q&A, and we'll get to them later.
Thanks, Jim. As Jim said, if you have any questions, please please put them in our Q&A section so that we can answer those as the night goes on. If we have any questions that we are unable to answer during this time frame, we will make sure to provide email addresses to presenters so you can directly contact them. Next up, we have Andy Rossi to give us a hydrology or overall update as to what's happening in the basin for Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District. Andy was appointed as the general manager of the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District on July 16th. So he is a new general manager, but not at all new to the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District. He served as their engineer starting in 2009 and stepped into to be an interim general manager on June 1st of this year. Andy's worked with the district, has provided him with an appreciation of the need to preserve historic water use practices while managing for the institutional flexibility necessary to navigate future uses of the district and its constituents. Prior to joining the district, Andy worked as a hydrologist for several different consulting and engineering organizations across Colorado and parts of the Southwest. For the last 4 years, Andy has served on the board of the Colorado Watershed Assembly and has participated in a number of water industry programs and projects across the state. Andy has a BA in economics from Colby College and an MS in civil engineering from the University of Colorado. He and his family have called the Yampa Valley home for almost 20 years now, and we're really excited to have him speak.
All right, thank you very much, Alicia. Thank you, Jim. Thank you to the River District and the Roundtable for putting this on. It's really a great opportunity for all of us to share some information about, our valley's most important natural resource. What I'd like to do for you all tonight is give you a brief overview of just how the winter went coming into the season here water-wise. And instead of just running through sort of the rote, listing of how snowpack was and river flows are now, I'd like to give you a little bit of an insight into some of the work that we do here in the district in managing all the data sets that are out there and how we input those into the management of our facilities. On the screen in front of you right there is a photo of the upper end of the Yampa Basin. And it's actually in Garfield County, so they should have gotten an invite tonight. Maybe next time we can invite them. And the other thing of note, just a minor correction to what Jim said, the Yampa River may not have a trans-mountain diversion to the front range, but it does have a trans-basin diversion. It's in this picture, and there's a ditch that takes off from the bottom of Yampa Reservoir. And part of that water, all agricultural water for now, actually gets delivered into the Colorado Basin. So there is a trans-basin diversion here. We are in several counties, and the river does go under administration at the upper end of the system almost every year. So as we look into all the data that's presented to water managers and to ag users, industrial users, municipalities, what we're really trying to do every year is come up with a forecast of what we have at our fingertips to be able to use. And as we go through that, you have to kind of consider what are all the data sets that are available to water managers and forecasters. And there's a ton of them out there. You could think about stream flows, both historic and real-time stream flows. Those gauges are provided to us by two main sources, USGS, and the Colorado Division of Water Resources also maintains gauges. You could take a look at SNOTEL data. Those SNOTEL data sets and sites actually run from the Canadian border all the way down through the Rockies. It's extensive and it's very important. You might want to take a look at drought forecasting, precipitation, temperature. You might want to take a look at, the historical data of flows. There's a huge body of work on not only gauge data, but also paleohydrology, where you might be able to take the opportunity to look back all the way through almost 1,000 years worth of historical flows to get a sense of where you are this year and what your water year might look like. Now, as you look at all these things, for a water manager and for forecasters, once you start kind of considering the full spectrum of what's out there, things can get kind of blurry. Like this picture, you can kind of get lost into all these data sets. Which one should you use? Which one's going to be most predictive? And if you remember the slide that Jim put up about the relative contribution to our water resources in the West, and the Yampa River is the same as everywhere on the West Slope, 80% from snow, 10% from monsoonal precipitation, and 10% from groundwater. So what do we look at mostly? You guessed it, we look at snow. It is the most indicative indicator of how our water year is going to go. What I have in front of you here now is a chart of the snow water equivalent. And that is a metric of how much water content is in the snowpack in the mountains up above the Yampa River. The black line on your chart here, if you guys can see it, where the colors came through, that is our 2020 trace of the snow in the Yampa River. So it looks pretty much average, and indeed it was. It was boringly average. Good news for the Yampa River is that average is really good. It provides a lot of water. It gets us well into July like we are now. But you can't discount the other two contributors, monsoonal precipitation and groundwater, where you can kind of make or break an irrigation season based on, what sort of relative contributions you have. The other thing to point out is that the two bounds of our range of snowpack in the Yampa and White Basins right now are bounded by the consecutive years of 2011 on the high side, which is this trace, and 2012 on the low side. So indeed, climatic variation is happening right now, and we're seeing it in the Yampa River. So what do we as engineers do with all that data? This is what we do. We take something that's very simple and straightforward to measure and make it as complicated as we can. This is actually a worksheet that I use as a reservoir forecast for Stagecoach Reservoir. It's based on SNOTEL data. And what we've done, for at least for Stagecoach and Yamcola reservoirs, is we take a look at the historic population of snow water equivalency at different SNOTEL sites. And we try to develop for ourselves a statistical relationship between observed snowpack and peak snowpack and what the resulting observed runoff has been. And we filter it through that statistical analysis and come up with a way to track in real time during the winter how we think our runoff is doing. And we have a population of observations I've made over here during the year. This sheet is from mid-April, and that's sort of how the snowpack was tracing through our early and late winter right there. As you go through that, you can come up with a predicted forecast for the total inflow. This is possible almost for any point in the Yampa Basin or on a river basin. And you can come up with a total predicted inflow to our reservoirs. So we are watching this stuff closely. We're watching it in real time. And it really is the best metric we have for deciding what exactly could be our resulting inflow, which are these blue numbers off to this side of your screen, into the reservoirs we have. It's a long process, and we look at it weekly at the beginning of the season and then daily as we get into the spring. So how did that do for our reservoirs this year? This is a plot of the reservoir storage and inflows at Stagecoach Reservoir. The blue shading are the volumes of inflows. The red is our releases during the year. This blue or black line is the reservoir elevation. And the shaded gray part is actually tracking the date of administration on the river for the Bear River at the upper end of the basin. And the real takeaway from this is you can see early in March, we've got some inflows. We had a nice sort of medium runoff coming during April. And then March, it was continuing. And on Memorial Day weekend out there in May, the river went on call. So Memorial Day weekend during a snowstorm, the river went on call at the upper end of the basin. And you can see it had a pretty dramatic effect on stagecoach inflows there. So the takeaway from here is that, you know, not only do we need to be looking upstream at what's going on in the snowpack above us and river flows as the year is developing, we really as a community should be looking upstream at water uses too, because in many ways, what's happening at the top end of the basin here is a bit of a precursor for what's going to translate down through the system later through the year. At Yamcolo, we had a similar sort of dynamic. This is the trace for the Yamcolo storage. The black line is the reservoir elevation. The blue line are inflows. This green line here, this is actually our storage releases out of Yamcolo. And what you can see here is pretty early on, as the river went under administration, what we could refer to as the burn rate of delivered stored water at Yamcolo was pretty steep this year. And I would, again, encourage all of the users in the rest of the basin to start looking upstream at what's going on at the top end of the basin, because it can be indicative not only of what's coming our way, probably in water rights administration, but also during the year, it can be indicative for ag users and other folks in the basin of how the season's going to go. The fields up here that are being irrigated are all high elevation relatively of between 8,000 and 9,000 feet. And so what's going on with a river going on call up above at the top end of the basin is exactly what Jim was also talking about, whereas we're seeing temperature changes at lower elevations where the water is being delivered to, while our high elevation reservoirs, they're still iced over. And that's exactly what happened this year. I think the river went on call only 2 days after the ice came off Yamcolo. That's pretty early and it's pretty dramatic. So if you want to look through sort of what happened in the rest of the basin here, these are traces of inflow forecasts and also flows from the Colorado Basin Forecast Center. The blue are their predictions moving through the season, and this orange or brown color, however it showed up on your stream, is actually what we've recorded. These are the inflows into Stagecoach. They tracked very much average. They're average right now. We had a slight drop a couple weeks ago, but as the rains picked up, we've had a nice rebound in flows. To put that in perspective, this is the trace from last year. And you can see we're looking very much average again until we had this big uptick in flows. And that was, of course, the summer solstice snow bomb that came ripping through the Yampa Basin, had a dramatic effect. If you look at the river at Steamboat Springs for this year, similar trace, pretty good variability in our early predictions, narrowed into a nice average prediction. And right now we're looking at about average, but the flows right now here are a little bit fragile because we're still waiting for more of our monsoonal rains to pick up. We keep going down the basin. This is the trace from 2019 at Steamboat Springs. Same dynamic with the big snowstorm. Going a little further, this is the Elk River. Folks on the lower end of the basin right now are getting pretty concerned and considering extra releases out of Elkhead Reservoir for down through the lower reaches of the Yampa Basin. And one of the things they need to look at is how's the Elk River doing? It's a major contributor to our flows, and it's looking a little bit like it's tapering off and getting into some pretty concerning low flow levels. If we keep going, here's the Yampa River at Maybell. Again, not looking quite as average as we'd hoped. It's below average right now, and trending probably a little lower out through the rest of the season. Deer Lodge, we get a little bit of a rebound in the flows as we get further down into the system. Just a greater contributing area. Maybe the use patterns are a little bit different. So I know that was a lot of information to get out in 10 minutes, and I'm already over my time here, but If anybody has any questions about any of this stuff, please feel free to reach out to us. One of the things I mentioned here is that water users need to be looking upstream at what's coming their way. I think that's not only important physically, but I think as water users on the lower end of the basin start contemplating water rights administration on the main stem of the Yampa out in the future, which I believe is going to start coming more frequently, I think those users need to start looking upstream at the priority list. I think all of you users on the lower end of the basin need to start looking 6, 10 rights ahead of you in priority, finding out what those people do on regular practices. Are they upstream of you, downstream of you? And you all need to make sure you've got good measuring devices. Measuring of flows here in the Yampa Valley is a little bit behind the curve from the rest of the basin. It's around Colorado. And to help out with that, we at the Upper Yampa District, in partners with the Yampa White Green Basin Roundtable and the NRCS, have a diversion infrastructure improvement project on the ground right now. You can get more information about this project from Holly Kirkpatrick at our office, but it is directly applicable to measuring devices and upgrading diversion structures. I think in total there's $200,000 worth of funds available for our basin for this purpose. So please, everyone get in touch with us and we will help you make use of those funds. I'm over time and thank you very much. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Thank you so much, Andy. We did add a link in the chat section to take you to the Upper Yampa Water Project, Diversion Infrastructure Improvement Project grant. So if anybody's looking for that information, it is in the chat. And we have also included Holly Kirkpatrick's email if you would like to email her to get more information on that. At this point in time, I'm not seeing any questions. Again, you can use the question and answer section to ask any questions of Andy while he's here tonight. We will provide an email for him later on in the evening if you think about a question later on. Next up on your screen, we've got Lindsay Marlowe. Lindsay is representing, I do apologize there. Lindsay is representing the Friends of the Yampa as the program manager, an environmental and recreational nonprofit advocating for the entire Yampa watershed. She also provides support for the Yampa Riverfront and integrated water management planning process. She has a background in watershed and environmental science, environmental policy, and outdoor recreation leadership. She lives right in Steamboat Spring with her husband and 2 boys. She enjoys hiking, camping, rafting, fly fishing, mountain biking, and most of all, Zooming with her constituents to talk about the role of rec in the Yampa River Basin.
Thank you, Alicia, and thanks everyone for joining us tonight. I'm honored to be able to present on recreation along with my co-host, Josh Feenstra with Good Vibes River Gear. So Marsha will get into it a little bit more, but I have been responsible, as Alicia said, with not just Friends of the Yampa mission, but working with the Yampa River Fund on the management entity, as well as the integrated water management plan process, which Marsha will get more into. But I specifically did outreach related to environmental and recreation uses and stakeholders. And it isn't, can you move forward, please? Okay, so the integrated water management plan is the Basin Roundtable is leading the development of the plan, and it will help identify actions to protect the existing and future water users and also support a healthy river ecosystem. And so we have several stakeholder groups and outreach groups. I am the environmental rec, and then there's ag as well as municipal and industrial uses. The results, we're gonna compile all the data that we collect in this stakeholder engagement, and then we'll be able to create a ranked list as well. We're also engaging with getting environmental and engineering assessments done, and this will all be put together and a final list will be done in 2022. So we can prioritize projects. Next, okay. So in my environmental and rec outreach, this is still being analyzed, but I can say that I reached out to 22 stakeholder groups representing the upper, middle, lower segments, as well as the Elk River, and then both groups. And we got surprisingly an even distribution of questionnaires filled out representing both environmental and rec groups. So a total of 67 questionnaires were filled out. And in this questionnaire, it's to identify areas of concern, things that we can work on, for instance, hazardous diversions, bad access areas, any issues with other stakeholders, etc. And then we got a pretty good distribution of all the segments. The reason why the percentages add up to over 100% is because many groups represent more than one segment. Next. So as far as recreation and COVID impacts, that's really like the theme this year, especially because recreation is not just something all of us enjoy, but it also relates to the economy. And I reached out to the upper, middle, and Elk River outfitters and stores related to recreation on the river. And the overall consensus was they actually had a really good season. Once everything was opened up, they were able to operate at full capacity, mostly with like fly fishing outfitting. Their floating trips, they had to change a little bit for social distancing. But if anyone that has river gear or outdoor gear stores had a stellar year. And in fact, it just brings us back to the dependence on recreation and how we're learning that it's not just recession proof, but it's also pandemic proof and can be the future investment in this watershed. So a lot of the stores had issues with running out of inventory, and then we also saw a huge impact, if I'm sure everyone's noticed, of river use. So recreation became a private thing. People started buying boats and getting their gear ready and getting out on the river. And I have a picture here of Little Yampa Canyon. Friends of the Yampa has a webpage related to the canyon because we've done a lot of outreach there. We've built campgrounds there. And we normally get 1 or 2 questions a year asking how to access the canyon, what they recommend on float times. And this year we had about 10. So that's pretty big deal. And I know Josh downriver had a lot more as well because he provides shuttling for that canyon. And we're also seeing a longer use period. So it used to be people would ride the river in high flows and then just medium flows, but now we're seeing people using it as low as possible. And if it's public land, they push it and they're willing to walk their boat down the river if they need to. Go ahead. So Friends of the Yampa and what we're doing for recreation is we advocate for recreational access to the river, but we also understand that with increased access and increased use also means impact. And we want to curb that as far as we don't want to negatively impact the river because all stakeholder groups need to use it, and we don't want to adversely affect the watershed. So we're anticipating a lot of growth, especially because of the environmental or the economic importance of recreation in this valley, but also proper use and just good stewardship of our recreational use. We're also working on building our stakeholder relationships and understanding the communication is always needed versus, for example, recreation in the agricultural community. And then we're trying to connect the youth to the river because many times recreation is the segue into river stewardship. So we understand that we need to do this all downriver, upper and lower, and that the youth is the future. So we're trying to get people involved in our youth river camps and outreach to all socioeconomic statuses and backgrounds. And then we're also trying to talk to our own community, the recreation community, and we're developing tubing etiquette videos, and it's generalized so Craig can use them because they also get tubers. And then we're also teaching boaters how to have good river etiquette, and that's private land rights and how to be a respectful boater, how to respect other users, and just generally be overall responsible. Next slide, please. And so, and part of Friends of the Yampa's advocacy is understanding that with recreation comes responsibility. And the city of Steamboat gets to, if the flows get below 85 CFS, they shut down the river for voluntary closures. And as you see, we have a picture of visitors on the river still, even though it says voluntary closures. And we look to close that gap with the visitors that don't know how we do it here, because we all must sacrifice a little when the river is getting low. Next slide. And I want to close before I give it off to Josh, but Little Yampa Canyon is something we're really proud of, and we hope to see some great uses of this section. It is a great entry-level overnight boating area, and I hope you guys get out there, and please reach out to either Josh or Friends of the Yampa if you're interested. And then I'm going to hand it off to Josh now.
Thanks, Lindsay. For those of you who aren't familiar with Josh Veenstra, Josh was born and raised in Craig, Colorado. He definitely loves adventures, enjoys canyoneering, rock climbing, camping, mountain climbing, rafting, and all things outdoors. Along with his wife, he started Good Vibes River Gear and they manufacture their own mesh river and camping gear. He has 2 young boys who keep him busy, and he can share his love of the outdoors with us now. Thanks, Josh.
Hey, thanks for inviting me. I am Josh Veenstra, owner of Good Vibes River Gear in Craig, Colorado. Basically, what we've seen with recreation on the river in the last 5 years is easily double or tripling the usage. With that, the city of Craig, Moffat County Tourism, we've kind of teamed together to build what you see here is a new plan for a whitewater park that runs through Craig, and we're going to restore some of the banks. We've just seen so much rec use in the last couple of years that it's impossible to look the other way anymore. Our coal mine is shutting down in the next couple of years, and so there's a dramatic shift in our mentality, our thought process, to kind of gear up for this recreation that we're about ready to come upon. Next slide. So this is kind of the lower part of the Little Yampa Canyon, which this year we've seen on Memorial Day weekend, there was probably a total of 60 plus vehicles at the put-in or at the takeout, which there's a lot of river miles in there, but that's showing a lot of use and how, like what Lindsay touched on earlier with the COVID, and what happened was everybody couldn't go to concerts. So what did they do? They decided to come see our river, and they realized that it was spectacular, and they're planning vacations for next year. And that's just kind of a mindset. If they're coming, they're going to tell their friends about it. And before you know it, they're going to tell their friends, and we're going to have an actual economic powerhouse here that we could use along with all the agriculture. Recreation is going to be right there with us. This is the bottom of the slide on the right. You see that's the bottom of what they call juniper diversion, or the top of the rapid, actually, where the Maybell ditch is pulling water off to supply Maybell agriculture. And then the rest of the river gets a really fun wave train, and that's this year. All the boat ramps has seen so much recreation that the state wildlife and parks, they are revamping all of the campgrounds on the lower basin, including the boat ramps, and planning to put 1 to 4 more campsites in the actual Little Yampa Canyon within the next year or 2. Back to timeframes, our water park should be done at 2022-23 time frame. Next slide. So this is basically Cross Mountain. It's kind of like the gym of the Northwest. Basically one of the nicest whitewater runs in Colorado, could be argued, but definitely to the locals, it is kind of the gym that everybody likes to talk about and has to get down the river once or twice a year. It's very extreme. The recreation potential for this area is unlimited with the Class 5 boating. You wouldn't expect it to come out of the mellow Yampa and into this Lion. it just is unreal, the potential that this little canyon has for the springtime upflow. And then as you come down, you catch the bottom flow. And at the right weekend, you'll see over 100 people at either the put in or the takeout, and 50, 60 boats down the river. And the first time I did it, I met people from Maine, Florida, and California, all just coming to this one little canyon that we had no clue about. And through the years, it's just gotten so big. I can't believe where recreation is taking Moffat County. And just downriver from this is Dinosaur National Monument that sees 1 million+ visitors a year. They're embracing the river scene as well. Like they've, one of the hardest river permits to pull in the nation is the Little Yampa Canyon. So the future for this area is recreation is coming full steam. It's surpassing a lot of the other big powerhouses. And I think we're going to open it with open arms and really positive future.
Thanks, Josh.
Yeah.
I think we had one question that came in, and I'm not sure if it's going to be appropriate for you or Lindsay to take on this question, but the question was, what happened to the river rangers? You guys spoke to, or Lindsay spoke to, having some etiquette classes, but apparently there may have been some river rangers out there before that are not on the river. Do you have any answer for that? Oh, looks like we may have lost. There we go. If you'll just unmute. There we go.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I needed a little help. As far as the river rangers go, the Yampa River State Parks, they've kind of revamped, and they have a new officer, Jacob Dewhurst, and his goal is to bring the Yampa and the recreation scene into the next, into the future. He's talking about trying to work with the BLM and bring in more river campsites, where they've seen at Yampa River State Park, they've seen double or triple the amount of usage this year. And so he's just planning to put in campsites, and their goal is to try to stay on the front of recreation so it doesn't give anybody a bad taste as private landowners.
Awesome, thank you for that answer. If you have any other questions, again, put them in the question and answer section of the Zoom outlet there. We're going to move on and talk about agriculture and the integrated water management plan. I would like to introduce Miss Marcia Doggenbach. Marcia is part of a multi-generational ranching family based in the Elk River. That valley is near Steamboat Springs. She and her husband John have chose to stay in the region, ranch, and raise their family in a location that is known for pristine waters and lots of snow. Marcia's professional career of over 40 years included 25+ years with the USDA Farm Service Agency and 15 years as executive director of the Community Agricultural Alliance. She's been instrumental in developing and implementing community-based programs, meetings, workshops, tours, and educational opportunities that underscore the importance of agriculture to the economy and culture of Colorado. She worked closely with the Yampa White-Green Roundtable for 12 years, helping formulate and administer their public education and outreach programs in Moffat, Rio Blanco, and Routt counties. Although she's retired from paid positions, Marcia remains a passionate activist for agriculture, open space, working landscapes, the protection of healthy, abundant natural resources, and local community. With that, I give it to you, Marcia.
Thanks, Alicia. That was a great introduction. And thanks for asking me to be here this evening to kind of talk about agriculture and some of the issues that we are facing and some of the answers that are coming. History of irrigated water in Northwest Colorado dates clear back to the 1880s, continues today, and will be instrumental for the future ag success, both economically and culturally. The Yampa White-Green Basin Roundtable has always been a strong proponent of ag water rights, and 3 of their established 10 goals of the basin directly address ag water. One is to protect the Yampa White-Green Basin from compact curtailment of existing decreed water uses and some increment of future uses. Another one is to protect and encourage agricultural uses of water in the Yampa White-Green Basin within the context of private property rights. And then another one is to improve agricultural water supplies to increase irrigated land and reduce shortages. The Basin Roundtable has worked diligently for years to assure that all water users in the basin all uses are considered and met, to build partnerships and strengthen relationships to keep water in the valley, and to assure that quality and quantity of the water is sustainable. The Roundtable also understands that diversion structures and measuring water and water delivery systems are expensive, and they realize that the installation of these new structures and upgrades can really be cost prohibitive, particularly in a year like 2020. Private property rights and water rights are sensitive issues that they are very cognizant of, and we also want to, all of us want our water to stay in the valley for ag, municipal, industrial, and recreation. So one of the things that's been going on recently, as Lindsay referred to as well, is the integrated water management plan developed by the Basin Roundtable. And the goals of this are to identify and address needs and issues along mainstream water sources and irrigation ditches, to work with ag producers and water right owners to mitigate costs, to encourage scientific research to benefit ag water use, to afford, what do you want me to do? Oh, could you go to the next slide, please, Alicia? To encourage scientific research to benefit ag water use, to afford an opportunity to learn about both water user needs and the environmental needs of the river, to build working relationships with ag organizations, agencies, and departments, and to build working relationships with recreation and environmental groups. So what has the IWMP been doing for agriculture? Well, first of all, overall, the IWMP formed two separate subcommittees. One is a technical subcommittee, and that's headed by Brian Hodge of Trout Unlimited, and the other is the stakeholder subcommittee headed by Michelle Meyer of Community Ag Alliance. Volunteers serve on both these committees using their personal interest and professional knowledge to accomplish the tasks that have been requested by the Basin Roundtable. One of the things that we did was to hire two segment coordinators to meet one-on-one with the water users. Jerry Elbers from South Route has been working for in the Upper Yampa, Middle Yampa, and Elk River sections. And Jen Hinkmeyer from Moffat County has been visiting with the Lower Yampa between below Elkhead up to the state Utah line. We also have hired Nicole Seltzer, who you're going to visit with here just shortly, as the IWMP General Project Manager. And she has the job of herding cats with all of us. So the technical subcommittee has been out performing engineering and science field work to determine the conditions, operations, and needs of the river structures, the control structures, and the measuring devices in the basin, which you're looking at right now. To date, they've looked at 45 structures, and they're all done with the landowners and leasees' permission. They're also working with one of the contractors that we have hired to assure that this data is correctly reported back to the Basin Roundtable. And then secondarily, you can go to the next slide if you would, please. Jerry and Jenna are meeting on the ground across the basin with willing ag producers to determine what is needed for infrastructure improvements. And today to date, they have interviewed over 125 irrigators. Also, this subcommittee will be analyzing the comments and concerns gained with these discussions about how to improve communications, water education, and regulatory obstacles. One thing that's important to note with this, that all participation with the IWMPA is voluntary and confidential. Because of the diverse assessments and the stakeholder interviews, the diversion assessments and the stakeholder interviews, we are already gaining a better basin-wide understanding of the need of irrigators and where opportunities exist for projects that can meet both their needs and the needs of the river. So ag already has strong relationships with recreation via hunting and fishing leases, guide and outfitting operations, and wildlife advocacy. Josh and Lindsay both have discussed what they are finding with the rec world, and we all recognize that as recreation continues to grow, the impacts and potential conflicts between private landowners and the non-educated rec folks will continue to grow. And that's why those of us that are in agriculture need to be involved. We have to be proactive with our networking opportunities. We've got to talk to people. We have to agree to be on boards and committees when asked. And if we're not asked by them, then we need to ask to be part of those discussions and decision-making processes. We all have to look to the future and be part of the solution to assure that agriculture continues in our valley. It truly is the goal of everyone involved with the Integrated Water Management Plan, the Basin Roundtable, and the agencies and organizations to maintain agriculture water in the valley, recognizing that healthy ag will help protect the water that all of us rely on and love. So thanks for your time. We appreciate you being with us for the virtual State of the River presentation. And I'm going to turn it over to Nicole now.
Thanks, Marcia. As Nicole gets settled in, I'll tell you a little bit about her. Nicole Seltzer leads River Network's efforts to strengthen the influence and effectiveness of local coalitions in Colorado and the Western US through knowledge sharing, mentorship, and breaking down silos. Prior to joining the River Network, Nicole was executive director of the Colorado Foundation for Water Education, where I started to learn a lot of information about the Colorado River when I first started. Nicole also oversaw the production of Colorado's premier magazine, Headwaters, as I said, for almost 10 years. Her guidance of a leadership development program with over 125 alumni from Colorado's water community is a source of pride. She served on both sides of a board of directors for several watershed coalitions, including the Colorado Watershed Assembly, and has led multi-day tours for elected officials, planned week-long professional conferences, chaired a year-long statewide celebration of water, and helped to do so much more. Thanks for participating with this, Nicole. We look forward to hearing what you got to say.
Hi, Alicia, thanks. And thanks to the River District and the Ag Alliance and the Roundtable for bringing us all together tonight. And thanks to you. I see we've got 59 people still who are trucking through this with us. So thanks a lot, you guys, for taking the time out of your evening. Before I dive into just like a minute of remarks and kick off a quick video that we did, I do actually want to show you, Marcia really likes to have an audience when she does her presentations. So she brought this. There's actually a huge basket of vegetables and fruit with faces on them sitting over here. So I work for a national nonprofit organization River Network, whose expertise is bringing capacity and technical support to local coalitions that are working to solve water challenges in their areas. We work across the country, and in Colorado, that takes the form of initiating and supporting stream and integrated water management plans. As Marcia said, at the end of the day, the Yampa White Green Basin Roundtable's vision for the integrated water management plan is a roadmap for the Roundtable to make progress on its goals and to create a lot of multi-benefit projects. A lot of these are already going on in the basin, and we had hoped actually this summer to hold field trips and tours with the water users and interested members of the public to visit some of the multi-benefit projects that are going on. So some of the projects that benefit irrigators, the environment, habitat, fisheries, recreation. But unfortunately, we can't do that. So instead, in this time of physical distancing, we have decided to bring you some videos. So I'm gonna kick off a short video here on the Lower Elkhead Creek Restoration Project. This is the first of several videos that we're going to put together that explain how working together can accomplish more than just trying to meet the needs of a single landowner or one conservation goal. So with that, I will turn it over to the video, and thanks so much.
In 2019, The Yampa White Green Basin Roundtable began an integrated water management plan for the Bear, Elk, and Yampa rivers. It will combine science and engineering assessments with stakeholder input to identify voluntary projects and strategies to protect existing and future water uses and support healthy river ecosystems both today and in the future. The Lower Elkhead Creek Restoration Project is an example of the kind of project that the Integrated Water Management Plan will identify and help spur towards action. Projects that are good for both the river's health and water users are not new on the Yampa River, but the Yampa White Green Basin Roundtable wants to help kickstart even more of them to protect against an uncertain future.
My name is Caitlin Vo, and I am Trout Unlimited's Yampa White River Basin Project Coordinator and a partner biologist for the Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS. Elkhead Creek is a tributary to the Yampa River located northeast of the city of Craig. Since the 19th century, it has been used predominantly for hay production and livestock grazing. Lower Elkhead Creek is a 9-mile stretch located downstream of Elkhead Reservoir. The reservoir was built in the 1970s to provide water for many different uses, including the endangered fish recovery program.
My name is Keith Pankey. I've been on the creek for 69 years plus. This is my Uncle Winfield, and he's been on the creek a long time, so. About 87 years. This is where we raise our hay, and this is where we winter our livestock.
I'm Tim O'Neill, and this is my wife, Lane O'Neill, and we've lived here at the ranch here for 5 years. We're raising cattle here, a herd of Wagyu. In addition, we like to use it recreationally, so we've actually put some fish in the water, and we enjoy fishing.
Hi, my name's Lorraine Katchek, and this is my son, Blaine. Our family has lived out here on Elkhead Creek for 20 years.
I'd say the biggest issues we've noticed out here is the erosion of the banks, especially in the springtime during high water. We're losing, over the 20 years, we've lost quite a bit of ground to erosion just being washed away because of the high water.
There's a lot of erosion. Late summer, I cannot irrigate, use my water rights because of the structure being so far down the creek. And without the creek, without the hay, we're not able to raise livestock.
The proposed restoration work here on Lower Elkhead Creek has been a multi-purpose, multi-benefit project from the beginning. There's, of course, the agricultural component of protecting ag infrastructure, water rights, and operations here in the Lower Elkhead Creek Valley. There's also an environmental component, and we're trying to restore the riparian corridor and improve in-stream aquatic habitat and water quality.
Planned restoration efforts on Lower Elkhead Creek will include regrading vertical banks, installing tow rock, log veins, and other woody material, planting native riparian vegetation, and working together with landowners to fence off riparian areas from livestock until fully reestablished.
The ultimate goal is to have it restored and as healthy as can be. So identifying, hey, that we can all work together, the water, the improvement of the water works for everyone, but we then have our own specific needs of what we would like to do.
A goal for us in the future is to have some habitat improvement and a shelter for the fish and the wildlife, the birds that we see here, and improving the whole river, not just our section, but up and down, knowing that it will improve the whole waterway.
We've seen incredible support come out of not only our local community here in Northwest Colorado, but from state and federal agencies as well. The City of Craig, Tri-State, and the Colorado River District have all committed funding to this project. And we've also received support from Colorado Parks and Wildlife, the Yampa White Green Basin Roundtable, and CWCB, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the NRCS. This support and investment into the project has been critical, not only for moving this project forward,
but helping to share the financial burden with those individual landowners who have been most affected by these ongoing issues.
We could not do a project like this on our own. It is very expensive, and without the help and the resources that are out there, we could not do this project on our own. They have been very instrumental in helping us seek funds to work on our banks and get this project going.
We have been, for the last 30 years, voicing our concerns, and we have finally got a hold of the right people, the right agencies that are willing to help us.
Through this IWMP process, and once we identify projects, we can strategically coordinate funding and help streamline the planning and implementation process and help individuals or groups wanting to get these projects done actually get projects in the ground. The Lower Elkhead Creek Restoration Project is an example of the kind of project that the Integrated Water Management Plan will identify and help spur towards action. You can learn more about the work of the Yampa White-Green Basin Roundtable and its Integrated Water Management Plan at yampawhitegreen.com.
Thanks. What a great project. As said in the video, if you want to learn more, you can go to yampawhitegreen.com. That has been put in the chat for you. Next up, to talk about on-the-ground efforts and the work that is being done with our Division 5 engineer, is a conversation with Erin Light and Jackie Brown. Bringing up Jackie Brown, who was appointed to the Colorado Water Conservation Board in 2019. She hails from the Yampa Valley in northwest Colorado, South Routt County. She holds a BA in History from the University of Colorado, a Master's Certificate in Water Resources from Colorado State University, and is currently a law student at the University of Arizona. Jackie has held various positions in natural resources field and is currently the Water and Natural Resources Policy Advisor to Tri-State Generation and Transmission Association, a rural electric wholesale cooperative. In this role, Jackie is the legislative advisor on Western water issues across the Colorado River Basin and federally while continuing Tri-State's water stewardship and partnerships. Jackie is the past chair of the Yampa White-Green Basin Roundtable and was an author of the Basin Implementation Plan. We are so happy to have Jackie here with us, and we look forward to the conversation that she has with Division Engineer Erin Light. Thanks, Jackie.
All right, thank you, Alicia. That was a great video. So I don't know, Erin, I think you and I are going to be able to do almost as good as that awesome video of actual water projects on the ground. So we'll let the audience decide. So I have the great pleasure of introducing Division Engineer Erin Light. She's in her 14th year as head of the Division 6 here in Northwest Colorado. She is the first female division engineer in the state, and she is tasked with a very large region, which includes the White River as well as the North Platte over by Walden. I would venture to guess that this has got to be one of the most difficult years of those 14, with the dry hydrology, measuring device implementation program, and a decadal abandonment list due, as well as with the COVID budget crisis and added complications of not being able to run a normal office. Currently, Division 6 is short-staffed by 3 positions: a program assistant and engineering tech, which is their front of the office contact, the North Platte Deputy Commissioner vacancy, and the White River Deputy Commissioner position. And unfortunately, with no funding to hire these positions for at least 2 years. Additionally, there's been a recent directive by the the Department of Natural Resources Director, Dan Gibbs, that the division office may not open until at least January 1st of 2021. So given this, possibly the most important question I will ask Division Engineer Light this evening is, how can people get in touch with your office?
Yeah, so Jackie, I did provide to Alicia earlier today a map of our basin. When I say our basin, actually all of Division 6, that has the names of where our water commissioners are located, along with the table. And Alicia, I don't know how you might want to provide that, or if you want to bring it up, but or even provide it through the chat. So that is available through both a table and then the map that shows where the individuals are located.
Thank you. And I guess I have to ask, can you remember a more complicated and difficult year, or does 2020 with its murder hornets, epidemic, and civil unrest reign supreme in this category on the Yampa River?
Well, this year definitely is presenting its challenges, Jackie. We definitely came into the year knowing some of those challenges. Those challenges, like you indicated, were the orders and our efforts for individuals to install head gates and measuring devices. And then, of course, we knew about the abandonment list as we've been preparing that list for some time. But certainly the COVID virus and our staying at home and our 2 retirements and unable to fill those positions added to the severity of what all we had going on. So yes, we're all very busy here in Division 6, and we just keep plugging along and doing the best we can.
Thank you. So we don't have a lot of great news, I guess, regarding hydrology, as Andy informed us earlier, though we have been blessed with the monsoons of late. But in general, as we know, 2020, the Yampa is experiencing extremely dry hydrology. As a resident, not even a water expert, what stood out to me was that the spring was atypical. It was springy. We didn't get a ton of snow. And, you know, normally I always whine a little bit about the extension of winter and how we never actually get a spring, but this year it seemed like we had our first in a while. So that we had the earlier peak flows up and down the basin, as Andy pointed out earlier, and we're just feeling a little bit of relief now, but I'd love to hear your perspective on the water year and the potential for the Yampa River to go on call for the second time.
Yeah, Jackie, certainly these rains have been a relief, but I'm also looking at an extended forecast where there aren't any rains in the forecast, and undoubtedly in order to keep some calls off the rivers that are not necessarily a normal call in dry years or even normal years, we need more precipitation like we've had. And the other thing that I've noticed, I'm sure others have too, is the amount of wind we've had, definitely prior to those rains. And then, you know, certainly today, our first nice warm day since having those rains. And I don't know about everybody else, but there was a lot of wind at my house. So those winds certainly concern me. And also, you know, when it comes to looking at rivers and potentials for calls, you know, obviously up to this point, we've had several calls and people can go online and look at that administration that we've had. But I do, when conditions get dry like this, I'm looking at gauge stations frequently. And I'm looking at them throughout my area. I even look at the White River. And specifically on the White River, I look at the 3 or 4 gauges up near Meeker, and I'm looking to see when and if the flows are going to drop below 200 CFS. The 200 CFS is kind of that target flow that I'm looking at because the Colorado Water Conservation Board has an in-stream flow water right on the White River that goes all the way down to Piance Creek. So I'm certainly paying attention to those flows. Not, you know, typically when those flows do drop below 200 at some of those gauges, I'll be in communication with the Colorado Water Conservation Board. Similarly with the Elk River, which we're starting to see administration in almost every year, I'm looking at that gauge to see whether or not the flows drop below 65 CFS, which again is an in-stream flow water right. Which is what we've seen for calls and administration in recent years since about 2010, our calls from the CWCB for their in-stream flow water right on the Elk River. Then lastly, when we look at the Yampa River and getting more directly to your question of a potential call on the Yampa River this year, you know, I definitely am looking at the flows, and I've seen some positive aspects in that we've been staying fairly steady right now. The average flows are starting to come down while our actual flows today are staying flat. So the curves are coming together, which is a good thing. We're not at the 25th percentile anymore, maybe at the 30th or 40th percentile. With the one exception is I do look at Deer Lodge, and the flows there concern me a little bit, which is about where the call came in 2018, is way down there in Lily Park. So you know, I think as long as the flows can stay steady and we don't see great drops in them, we might be able to we might get away from not having a call in the Yampa. But certainly I can't predict whether there's going to be a call, but I am concerned. I've been in communication with my staff, and will continue to be in communication with my staff, primarily to see, you know, who's turning on, what diversions are occurring, and obviously tracking Elkhead Creek Reservoir releases. And on that note, I thought it's worth mentioning with the Elkhead Creek Reservoir releases, the recovery program every year has to determine what flows or what targets they're going to try to meet at Maybell. And this year they have picked the moderate year or average year flow. So their target this year is 134 CFS. So as they start to see flows at Maybell start to drop below 134 CFS or get close to that range, they'll begin to release water from Elkhead Creek Reservoir, which we're obligated to protect all the way down, technically to the confluence of the Green River, but primarily to the Dinosaur National Monument.
Thank you, Erin. I'm having a COVID experience where my family's shouting in the other room and the door didn't get shut. So sorry, everyone. Well, thank you for that. And I know no one can predict a call. We would all really appreciate it if you could, though, but such are the realities of a river like the Yampa. So we'll move on a little bit, and I want to talk to you about measuring device implementation on the Yampa and White. I know notices were sent out I believe it was last spring on the Yampa, and then just this past spring for the White. So what are your thoughts? How are things progressing? Would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. And, you know, honestly, Jackie, I've been very pleased with the cooperation we've had. So yeah, you're correct. In March of 2019, we sent out notices requesting people install head gates and measuring devices on those structures that we knew were deficient of having those. And then we followed up with orders in September for those that didn't end up putting measuring devices or head gates in. Those orders then gave people until the end of November to install the devices. However, you know, one of them, given the short time period, but also the weather we had in the fall, many people were not able to comply with that order before the November 30th deadline. As a result, I had a lot of people request extensions of time to comply with the order, which there wasn't one that I did not grant, so I granted all of them. And then I also had a lot of people opt to not divert water until they came in compliance with the order. Speaking to my water commissioners, not one of them have told me that they actually had to shut a head gate because they were diverting water contrary to the order. So right now people are still installing measuring devices. Those extensions were typically the extensions went through July 31st, somewhere between July 31st and October 31st, just depending on whatever people requested. So we should be seeing more and more measuring devices installed, and I'm getting pictures from my water commissioners all the time showing the installation of measuring devices. So I've been very pleased. Likewise, even on the White River, which I did issue notices in March 2020 for those folks over there to install measuring devices. I've had a lot of people calling me and talk to me about the measuring devices, and a lot of people calling me and letting me know that they're installing them. So again, I've been really pleased with that response. I had planned on issuing orders this fall again, but now on the White River and the Green for those measuring devices on the same time frame as I did for the Yampa. However, in working with and talking to the conservancy districts and conservation districts down there, I've opted to hold off on those orders and we'll reassess issuing those orders in the spring. The primary reason for doing that is because those districts are going to pursue trying to get some grant money to help water users, help finance water users getting those things installed.
Yeah, that's great. I know that it sounds like from the Upper Yampa, they have been getting good response from that program. And so offering that in the White and to, more producers will obviously be really impactful for our basin. So I'm sure everybody appreciates your patience on that, and certainly we look forward to seeing the good projects that come out of it. I know we're getting low on time here, so I wanted to touch on, I know something that is really important. Your office has been discussing it for a while. Andy mentioned it earlier tonight, that it's really important to keep records when you're a water user, and no time like the current if you haven't started yet. But obviously with the abandonment list coming out, which we'll talk about next, it's even more important in case you have something end up there. Do you have any words of wisdom when it comes down to record keeping?
Yeah, you bet. I mean, certainly the installation of these measuring devices, one of the main purposes for these measuring devices, certainly there's administration, but also it's to protect your water right. And to protect your water right, we need to know, and we need to have on record what each individual is diverting through their ditch. Our water commissioners do their best to get out there and visit as many structures as they can, but each water commissioner has hundreds of structures to visit. Hundreds of structures to visit during this very short growing season when people are going to be diverting water. And some water commissioners have administration to do as well. So we simply can't get to all the structures at all times, and certainly not during peak diversions. So it's really critical that people maintain those diversion records and submit them to our office, because our office is the only place that maintains these records. And when we talk about making sure that people are recording their flows and even recording their maximum flows, it really moves us into the abandonment and what our abandonment is based on. If you don't mind me, Jackie, kind of moving into our next topic is the abandonment. And we run a query. It's a statewide query that's run. It's the same query that's run throughout the state, and it's based completely on diversion records, on the diversion records we have on file. And it's looking at maximum diversions that have occurred over 10 years. If we don't know what your maximum diversion was because our water commissioner wasn't able to get out there, then that becomes problematic for the protection of your water right.
Yeah, thanks for diving into that topic. Obviously, there's been a lot of press around the abandonment list. It's a lengthy list up here in Northwest Colorado. I remember, I don't know, maybe a decade ago now, at our roundtable meeting, we had some consultants do a presentation on all of the water rights in the area, including conditional, and just being amazed at how many water rights are actually out there, versus what's being used versus what's conditional too. So there's a lot to consider when you look at administration up here and our unique the way that we work on our water rights, especially through the abandonment process. So let's get into that a little bit before we run out of time. I know something that has come up is, I'm being told we have plenty of time, so I can just drone on, which no one will appreciate. All right, so we'll get back to it here. So did someone from your office talk with water right owners about each of the structures that is on the list before it comes out, or what kind of outreach do you do before the list goes out?
We do the best we can. One of our tasks in the abandonment process is performing field inspections of those water rights that resulted from that query. So again, we do that statewide query. We get a list of water rights that are on the abandonment list, and our water commissioners then perform field inspections on those. And our water commissioners, I would say they 90, 75, maybe as close to 75% of the structures they've been able to perform field inspections on. Some of them they're going to still do this spring and this summer and fall. However, those that were done before the list came out, the water commissioners contacted the owners and let them know why they were coming out to their structure and what they were doing there. So for every field inspection that was done, the water commissioner did at least reach out to those water users and let them know that they were coming out to do a field inspection for the abandonment process.
That's great. And I noticed on the abandonment list, there are a number of pre-compact alternate points of diversion. Can you explain why those were on there? are on there?
Yeah, you bet. So, actually what had happened there was we particularly had 2 decrees that awarded a tremendous amount of alternate points, and they were alternate points for pre-compact water rights. These decrees that awarded the alternate points were actually post-compact. These decrees occurred in the mid to late 70s. So these alternate points were not awarded as pre-compact, a pre-compact component, if you will, to that water right. They're a post-compact component. And so these 2 decrees that I'm specifically thinking about encompass about 230 of the alternate points, that pre-compact alternate points that are on the list. So it's primarily those that prompted me to look at pre-compact alternate points. So when we stumbled upon some other ones in similar scenarios, those were added as well. So that's how those water rights got on the list. At this point, because there has been some concern raised about those pre-compact alternate points being on the list, I've been asked to reach out to each one of those users, and specifically some of the bigger ones, and talk to them about their pre-compact water rights or pre-compact alternate points, however you want to think of those, and consider whether or not those water rights or those alternate points are beneficial to their water rights portfolio. So right now I'm in the process of reaching out to all of those individuals, and ultimately if they decide that they still need to evaluate those in their water rights portfolio, or they need them, they will not be included in the revised list that is submitted to the court in December of 2021.
Okay, so great segue. What is the process for a water right owner whose structure right is listed to challenge that listing?
Yeah, so the process is right now to file a statement of objection with my office. I think a lot of people right now too think it's a court process. I've got a lot of phone calls of, do we really need to go to court over this? It's not a court process right now. You file a statement of objection with my office. The objection forms are online. There's instructions how to submit it. The preferred way is to submit them through our Ask DWR website. Those objections, when they are filed, are directly sent to a coworker of mine, Willie Summers, and myself, and then we will start evaluating those objections. Through that evaluation process, we may be reaching out to owners and having a further and deeper discussion about their water rights, how their water rights have been used, whether or not they have records of the use of the water rights, and whether there's been an intent not to abandon that water right. So individuals have an entire year right now. They have until July 1st of 2021 to file an objection with my office. And then after that point, I have all the way until December to make a decision on those objections and prepare my revised list. The revised list has to be filed with the water court by December 31st of 2021.
Thank you for that explanation. Well, I think we've sort of come to the end of our time, leaving a little bit of extra space for question and answer. So Alicia, I don't know if you're seeing anybody that has any questions for Division Engineer Light, but certainly we're still here.
Right at this very moment, I don't have any questions in the queue. I do have, I think, 1 or 2 that have been emailed to me that I will forward on so that they can be answered. We also, it looks like, have a raised hand from someone, so bear with me there. If you have raised your hand, I would ask that you please type your question in the Q&A section for us, and we will get that to you as soon as possible. In the meantime, we're going to let Erin and Jacqueline take a quick break. I'll highlight a few things with you guys as far as where you can find more information. Give me one moment here. Erin, it looks like one of the questions that was emailed to me, the noise that you're hearing in the background is my email, is how do we know who is using water above typical or beyond rights allowed if not everyone has measuring devices?
Well, I kind of see that as a 2-part question. Anybody can go online and look at diversion records. Our diversion records are available on the CDSS website. It's Colorado Decision Support System website. It's cdss.gov. diversion.state.co.us, and everyone has access to diversion records. As far as our records and how do we maintain a record when there's no measuring device, our water commissioners use different methods. A typical method we might use is a chip test. If individuals have heard of chip tests, where you actually throw some type of chip, a dandelion head, something like that, into a reach of the ditch, and you time how long it takes to go a defined or measured distance. And of course, then you also determine the area, the cross-sectional area of your ditch. That's what a lot of water commissioners use when there is no measuring device. Others, if they've become very, very good at estimating flows, they'll just simply estimate flows.
Thank you for that. Another question we have, you spoke about wind earlier, Erin, and that question is, why is wind a concern for water?
Well, I think I saw some ranchers on this phone call tonight, and I would rather them answer that question than me. But really, it's just sucking moisture out of the ground, out of the plants. I think it's been a lot harder for them to keep their meadows wet and saturated and get good growth from their grass. Now, cold nights didn't help at the beginning of this season. However, I have seen calls extend longer than would normally. Like on the Michigan River in North Platte, the call went longer than I've ever seen it go. And likewise, the typical calling structure on the Bear ran water quite a bit longer. And I attribute that to two things, the colder nights at the beginning of the irrigation season and the wind.
Thank you. To my other panelists on the line, is there anybody else who would like to answer that question about wind in the ag world? Marcia, possibly you? And we can hold off for just a second if there is someone who does want to answer that. I do have another one. This one is definitely for you, Erin. Legislation was passed last year to protect pre-existing uses, stock watering, from being called out by junior in-stream flows. Can Erin talk about how Division 6 is working with water users to ensure that pre-existing uses are protected?
Well, I guess I take that as what is happening as a result of this piece of legislation, and keeping in mind that this is a statewide legislation, not just specific to Division 6. And so Tracy Kozloff, who's one of our deputy state engineers, and myself have been tasked with developing a process for the state of Colorado and how we're going to receive applications for recognition of this pre-existing use and how we're going to process them, and try to come up with a consistent way for how we're approving these requests. So when I say we, I'm speaking about all division engineers that would receive a request for this pre-existing use, pre-existing being prior to the in-stream flow.
Thank you for that. We are almost done with time. There are still a few more questions here that I think we will reach out to you one-on-one to answer for you. At this time, if I could get panelists to get back on the screen. Give me 1 second while we get everybody back on the screen here. We've got Jim Pokrant, Andy Rossi. I just wanted to give everybody an opportunity to give last words if anybody had anything they wanted to say, or answer any questions that may have come up in chats or otherwise. Thanks, Nicole. Any last words for tonight?
Let me take a crack at the questions that are unanswered.
Sure. The first one is, can someone speak to the history and development of water rights here in Colorado?
Goes back to the mining days in the late 1850s, and water rights system is a scarcity system. So, oh, look at that crowd. So, the miners and agriculturalists soon found that water is scarce, and there had to be a way to guarantee people water rights. And guess what? If you're the first in time, you were the first in right. So with a water right, it always pays to have, like, maybe 1879. That would be a good one. That's actually probably the calling year on the South Platte River that predominates. Then the second question is, are water rights adjudicated? And the answer is yes. You don't have, and Erin helped me with this, you don't have an enforceable water right unless the water court certifies it and you have a piece of paper saying so.
That's correct. Yeah.
Alicia, if I may just kind of chime in on the first part of Jim's answer there, just on the development of water rights. I think it's really important for us in the Yampa Basin to remember that we're a little bit unique from the other basins in Colorado, that our water rights did develop a lot later than a lot of other basins. And it's got two main implications. One is, you know, we've had time to think about how that development has progressed, especially in these more recent years. We've got some time to put together community organizations like the Roundtable and other sorts of efforts that are trying to get their arms around the challenges we face. But the even more important one is this basin really needs to start thinking about the implications of not an imminent compact call of the Colorado River Compact, but eventual. And it's important for all of us to make sure that we're looking out in the future and coordinating with everybody to see what those implications might be here, because they could be dramatic for a basin like the Yampa, because we are a little bit unique about the late development of our water rights. So I just like to make that point to the audience that, you know, we haven't talked about it much tonight, but it probably should be a topic for one of these future presentations.
Thank you for that, Andy. And to Marcia, that question in the past about the wind and how it affects ag, did you have any comments on that?
No, you can stop on me. You can
just yeah, right now the wind is a serious situation because it just blows and blows and has consistently, and with the high weather or the high temperatures. The wind, it's just a combination of making things dry out even more. So I think as this continues, we're going to see a bigger impact. Hay yields are down, alfalfa yields are down, pasture yields are down. So the need for the water is going to continue even higher this year.
Thank you for that, Marcia. And again, thank you to all of our panelists for participating. It looks like we've got one last question. How can we prepare for a future of less discharge, higher temperature, less snowpack, and changes in precipitation to manage and use and plan for water in our basin?
I'll take a stab at that. You know, I think individually is a different question than what we can do as a basin, and I think that our roundtable has really done a great job of going through the planning documents, such as the initial basin implementation plan. We did a second basin implementation plan that put more detail and provided data for the model, the Yampa River model. And with our integrated water management plan that we're working on, as you heard about earlier, I think that's a huge factor in how we can make sure that our infrastructure is up to date and we can access our water, and we're not, you know, we're being efficient with that use, and we are working with the reservoirs that we have currently, as well as our non-consumptive uses, to just do our best job at managing our river for all the uses that we currently have. And we'll certainly have to be very judicious in how we plan for future water development, but I think we've made a great step forward in as a basin roundtable and as a water community, understanding the challenges ahead of us and not ignoring them. I know the city of Steamboat, city of Craig, folks are Upper Yampa, Maybell, irrigation, people are really making those shifts to make sure they have what they need to be able to continue operating in those challenges.
Thank you, Jackie. Does anybody else have an answer that they'd like to share?
Yeah, Alicia, I can chime in a little there as well. And I know Jackie just sort of seemed to have used some very carefully placed words there about, you know, everyone getting along and sharing information and the work that's been done, you know, collaboratively in the basin. But, you know, it's no joke. We really need to get together basin-wide to make sure, one, we've got a good understanding of what's going on the ground, and also, you know, what everyone's vision of the basin is going out in the future. How are we going to meet changing demands? How are we going to meet changing supplies? And, you know, the Yampa Basin's kind of got a little bit of a golden opportunity here. We're in a great transition period. We've got a huge infrastructure built up, you know, around the community, and we've got to make sure that we use it to the best of its ability, not just here, but we got to be talking to people like the River District and make sure that what we do here doesn't get lost as irrelevant, or we lose our relevancy in the greater regional, you know, sort of game here of the administration and the planning for the Colorado River system. So I would sort of echo some of Jackie's sentiments there, that, you know, we're in this together, and we got to share all the information, all the planning, and make sure we move forward together.
Yeah, I'll just add to what Andy said now and a few minutes earlier. The big jeopardy is the big decision on whether we could use our water rights to their fullest or they're curtailed. It's going to be a top-down decision related to the Colorado River Compact and the big river issues. So, you know, how can we control that? Well, that's where the River District comes in to try and put our best interests forward. But meanwhile, everything that we've talked about tonight is how to use water best. So that's addressing infrastructure, as well as looking at the environmental degradation that's occurred over time. And that's so the integrated water management planning systems, not only in the Yampa, but in the Colorado and the Eagle and Summit County, they're all looking at these kinds of issues, everything from infrastructure to environmental improvements. But anyway, I think the message is we need to be in it together, because the worst that can happen is a compact curtailment, and that would be top-down decision, and there's nothing more than people in Colorado hate worse than top-down.
Thanks for that, Jim. Did anybody else want to respond? All right.
Can I just make the plug for, you know, getting out there and making sure that we all use our voices with the legislature and our elected officials in general, or those that that represent this valley on boards. Myself with the Colorado Water Conservation Board, Doug Munger and Tom Gray represent this area, and Alden Vanderbrink for the White River on your board, Alicia, Colorado River District. And, you know, get involved. It's important as a small rural community that people understand that we care about our community, we care about agriculture, we care about recreation. These are really important topics, and we need to make sure our voices are heard as things get drier and as decisions are, you know, people try to make them at a higher level. So I would urge, especially those of you that are maybe a little bit younger, get involved, be on a board. We need you. Please, you know, get engaged, and anything we can all do to help you, reach out at any point, and let's do this together.
Thank you, Jacqueline. For anybody who wants to reach out, again, we have email addresses to all presenters from today's event in your chat section, so you can feel free to reach out if you want to continue to learn more or have further questions. At the River District, we do have another Water with Your Lunch program, if that's something you have not been involved in the past. It is a lunchtime series where we talk about all things water. You can sit and eat your lunch and drink your water with us. This next series is going to be on August 5th. This Water with Your Lunch is called The Calls That Command the Colorado River. In this program, we'll discuss the importance of Shoshone and the roller dam to all West Slope water users. This will start at noon and will go to 1:15. Panelists for the discussion include our General Manager, Andy Mueller from the Colorado River District, Mark Harris, Manager of the Grand Valley Water Users Association in Grand Junction, Faye Hartman, the Conservation Director of Colorado River Basin Program and American Rivers, and Jim Pokrant. Registration is now open, so please feel free to register there. And again, if you have any other questions, we are available at any point in time and can be emailed. We really appreciate you for spending your evening with us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, and have a great night.
Thank you, Alicia.
Have a good one.
Thank you all.
Oh yes, and thank you for bringing out the fruit. Everybody wants to see the fruit. Have a good night, folks.